Hit it, Steve.
From the CISO series, it's Cybersecurity Headlines.
Hello, all. I am indeed Rich Stroffolino, your glorious host here for the Department of No. This is Ordinarily, where we bring on some security experts. We talk about the biggest news of the week, what's going to impact your security teams. But, you know, it's the end of the year, December 29th. We know everybody's busy out here. So I decided I'm going to invite our glorious producer, Steve Prentice, on to the show. Steve pops in from time to time. He is the crafter of everything that happens on the Department of No. He's truly the alchemist that turns this substance into gold. Generous assessment, I think. But Steve, thanks for being here. I know it's a busy time of year, so I'm excited to talk with you about some of the big things we saw this year on the show.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a pleasure. I mean, we've had such a great year, fantastic guests, and sadly or otherwise, no shortage of things to talk about.
Yes.
So it's been a full year of news.
I remember when we started cybersecurity headlines in 2020, and I was like slightly worried. I was like, what if there's just like a slow day? And like the slow day is like, oh, there was only a breach that impacted 100,000 people today, only. You know, so truly never a shortage. But we thought this particular episode, we could kind of look back at because Steve and I and the rest of the cybersecurity headlines team, you know, we're in the news every single day. We're kind of following some trends maybe that are going on. We like to highlight some of those on our regular Department of No and the previous incarnation of the Weekend Review. But kind of what kind of struck us this year as particularly unique, some trends, some big stories, and maybe even a prediction for what 2026 will hold. Does that sound good to you, Steve?
I think that sounds perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I'm glad you didn't change your mind from our production design that we discussed clearly earlier. This is not spur of the moment in any way. So I guess I'll start first. And Steve, I imagine you have some version of this perhaps in your trends. But for me, the big takeaway, going back and just reading through all the headlines we had, that AI is now the main character when it comes to, I mean, certainly not just cybersecurity news, but kind of technology, society news, related news. Everything has an AI spin. I know that can be a little grating sometimes for our audience. Like, why does everything have to be AI? Like, these are the things that we're seeing in the news every single day, whether it's exploits, whether it's new research, whether it's new defensive capabilities. We don't get too much into like product announcements. So I feel like sometimes that side of that, we're not hearing as much on this show. There's no shortage of, go on LinkedIn. Don't worry, you'll see all of it. But I mean, I'm not crazy here, Steve, right? Like you kind of saw the same thing?
Oh, totally. I mean, this has been the year of AI, and anyone who sort of says, well, why has everything got to be AI? It's kind of like saying, why does it have to be cloud? Why does it have to be Microsoft?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be the internet? I mean, that's where we're at. And this is the new development and the evolution of the technology. It's been a long time coming. I mean, the AI itself has been around since the 1940s. I mean, Alan Turing was working on it in the 1940s. That's what the Turing test comes from. But what we've seen now in terms of generative AI specifically has just changed everything. And of course, the bad actors are always the first to capitalize on new technologies. So why do we have to listen to AI? Well, number one is the bad actors already have it. So you got to keep pace with what's going on, and their creativity is relentless in every area, and so too with AI. But the good news, as we will see, this is one of the first technologies where we're really on equal footing, you know, in terms of the good actors and the bad actors both having access to this new technology simultaneously. And that's quite exciting.
And I would say there's even the potential, because we saw, especially in like the first half of the year, I know there was a couple like Ghost GPT, or I think it was called, or something like that, where basically people were finding ways to jailbreak ChatGPT or another chatbot, and then selling access to that on a Telegram channel. That kind of trailed off in the back half of the year. I think they got better at finding those kind of use cases, but almost where there is, I would say, don't get me wrong, the creativity of threat actors always gives them, like, they can just come out of left field and they have to succeed once while defenders have to succeed every time. That's inherently asymmetric, but it almost feels like developing a large language model is not something that, you know, Joe threat actor can do on a whim. Obviously, those capabilities perhaps become easier over time, but right now, legitimate use of AI models is a little bit easier to come by for the defenders versus the defenders. That being said, it hasn't really stopped everyone from trying to be creative. We saw like Claude being used to automate an entire attack. and just kind of like that kind of whole agentic, I guess that's been kind of like the theme of for AI, anything AI this year is like, all right, how do we do agent-based stuff with it? How do we make it do stuff for us, not just make a chatbot spew stuff out for us? How can we actually get it to work? Yeah.
Well, that's just a natural evolution, right? I mean, you're going to look back on this and say, how quaint was generative AI? It's just the first step. And you ask it one question, it does just one thing. It kind of reminds me of MS-DOS-based programs in early video games.
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed, let's sticking on this topic just for a moment. I mean, at the beginning of generative AI, when do anything now, the DAN concept was around, and bad actors would tell generative AI, okay, I know you're not allowed to tell me the recipe for meth, but if you were, how would you do it? And to me, that's brilliant. It's reverse engineering. It's almost social engineering on the AI itself. So, no, this is the kind of stuff that happens, and we just have to be aware that it's going to continue to evolve, and sooner or later, agentic AI is just going to be the appliance of the day. That's all it is.
Yeah, and I would say our coverage in this space this year reminds me of where we were at with ransomware, like in 2020, 2021, where there was still we were reporting way more on it because we didn't have as a industry as much context for this. This was new to everybody. There was no agreed approach to ransomware in a lot of ways. Like it was still a very Wild West, it felt like, even though ransomware back then was still not anything new. Again, it was just new scale. It was new business models that were enabling it at so much more speed. And I feel like we're the same way with AI, where, in a year or two, the bar will be so much higher for this, or it'll be silly. It'll just be like, it'll be like saying they used a computer to serve a website, and it'd be like, why are we telling me about the tech stack? There'll be a shared assumption. Sure, an LLM is powering this. Who cares? It's the capability of the tool, or it's the capability of the threat actor, So I think a lot of things that we're saying are AI and ML advancements that we're framing that now will just become the backdrop of actual news in a couple of years for sure.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, Steve, what was one of your big trends this year?
Well, I think in addition to that, it was the size of the mega breaches. We had the Oracle eBusiness mega breach. We had Salesforce with the Sales Loft and Gain sites that basically gave the bad actors access to, Cloudflare, Google, Proofpoint, DocuSign, GitLab, LinkedIn, SonicWall, Verizon, TransUnion, Qantas, Farmers. I mean, the thing was, it opened up everything because everything was connected. So we have these enterprise level breaches, basically SaaS supply chain breaches. And this was news to me. I'm not going to say it was exciting in a positive way, because it's not positive, but in terms of seeing the increased sophistication of the threat landscape, this is on an enterprise level, and Oracle and Salesforce became the central victims. And their contagion spreads amongst all the people who feed into that. I think that takes leaps and bounds beyond ransomware hitting a hospital to now hitting a sector of the economy in a very sophisticated way. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and I think we've teased this out a couple of times on Department of No, is the idea of, and I'm thinking about the Cloudflare outage. I know that's not directly related to this, but like the idea of when do we classify these things as critical infrastructure, right? Because like Salesforce feels pretty darn critical for most of business, out there, like that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, Oracle, the same thing. It's like you don't realize what's the scope of it until you have a massive breach and it's touching everybody all at once. Everybody's scrambling for it. We saw this a couple of times with I'm forgetting the name of the FTP appliance that got breached, that touched Move For It, something I forget. I probably should have done my homework. Was it the Move It? Yeah. Well, but the same kind of thing where it was like, again, you don't realize the scope of these kind of things, but yes, kind of that third party, the reach of the third party breach, the SaaS supply chain. Again, it's always like that targeting the business logic, right? Of like, what aren't you paying attention to? That's what the threat actor is going to look for, right? Like, no, we're not going to try and push down your 10-foot thick wall. We're going to dig a moat to the cattle pasture that supplies your keep. This bad medieval analogy I'm going down here, but yes, I have it's funny you say that this is the theme for this year, because you're right. It's fairly recent, but like it was like we were hitting on it every week in a weird, we just find a new way to hit on it every single week. You're absolutely right.
Every week, yeah. On our production bingo card, third-party vendor was right in the middle because that's what everything came down to. So you got an organization, you establish perimeters, you establish your own internal security, and then the weak link becomes not someone knocking on the door from the outside, but again, penetrating through third parties. And it's other invisible connections that we see as the most efficient way to run a business is to have these large enterprise-level things that are fully connected. So I think that was a big shock to people everywhere to see the size and the scope of all of this. And you can always say, well, this is just data, but the problem is it is data, but it's also access. And we know that sophisticated threat actors out there aren't necessarily just stealing email addresses or passwords. They're there for the long term. And we're seeing this. We're seeing evidence of their footprints in all kinds of situations. And it's quite disturbing to know, actually, that it's kind of like Alien on the spaceship. It's in the air shaft somewhere. And that's all we have to be worried about, really.
Yeah, one of my other big trends for this year, I think, is related to that. It's more of the how some of these big breaches were felt, right? And to me, this was the year where I was seeing more real world pain from a lot of these cyber attacks. And some of these, it's like, okay, I got a breach, disclosure announcement in the mail, and I get 2 years of free credit monitoring. Okay, sure, I guess, whatever. But like we saw like just absolutely huge breaches that it wasn't just, like their cybersecurity team had a horrible month, right? It was, we had like just massive production outages for months. Japan ran out of beer for a while. We locally for myself, like the Cleveland municipal courts were out for several days because of a cyber attack. Like that is a non-trivial, I showed up to do a thing and I can't do the thing because of cyber. To me, feels new. And it also feels like that became increasingly common throughout the year. Like I was just going back, like I forgot the PowerSchool breach happened at the start of this year. That's not an outage, but like that affected a huge number of parents, myself included. We had a Siberian dairy plant that was shuttered because of Lockbit. Okay, Siberian, like you thought Siberia couldn't get any worse, and then you couldn't get ice cream afterwards. Probably not your favorite dish in Siberia, but to me that was, and certainly like the Jaguar Land Rover breach, right? Of like impacting GDP. Right, like that feels very real world pain. Not that I could afford their cars for me personally, but that to me was like not just that there were breaches, that they were definitely like hitting the real world in a much more tangible way that I'm used to.
Yeah, and it's a very exciting thing for threat actors to realize. It isn't just simply about money or ransomware or blackmail or again data. If you can start to hit the GDP, you've got immense political power now, and that becomes way more useful, I think. You can take advantage of that situation. Like Jaguar Land Rover or any major infrastructure industry, you can knock the economy sideways. So now you've got a sort of James Bond villain power, and that's, again, something that people have to watch out for as they assess the connectedness of their systems.
And I do wonder if that's related to the wave that we are now seeing. I think the UK is leading it, but we've certainly heard this conversation in other places of, just banning the ransom. Like this will solve it. And I know there's a ton of cybersecurity people that are extraordinarily passionate about that. Like we should not be funding cybercrime effectively by paying for ransoms. I am much more sympathetic since I started working with the CISO series of, listen, we have a business to run. This is a cost this is a cost benefit analysis. Like once we've hit this point, yes, should we have gotten to this point? No, but like, so not to get into that whole debate, but I wonder, because you're absolutely right. When you're hitting breaches at this scale and with this kind of reach, has an extraordinary amount of pressure on you. I wonder how much of these breaches is one, a response to that, and two, how much then this legislation is a response to these more real world impacts that we're seeing, both kind of feeding each other in a weird way. And so that's definitely something I'm going to be watching, next year to see how that conversation evolves. Because I do think it's become a little bit more nuanced and more urgent at the same time.
It has been, and we're seeing, of course, senior executives are becoming way more involved and aware of the importance of this. So it isn't just simply siloed down to the IT department. But at the same time, you're seeing a lot more burnout and frustration amongst CISOs and others to say, well, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen much more bigly than we can ever prepare for. So do I want to stick around for this? So again, in addition to the large economic and political power of knocking an economy sideways, if you can start to dissuade the best and the brightest from being off the front guard because of alert fatigue, there's a lot more danger in terms of how we are going to survive, not because of the mechanics of penetration, but because simply, again, psychological fatigue. That's something that I'm very close to in terms of my own practice. And that, to me, is just watching CISOs burn out because of the endless creativity of the bad actors.
Yeah, and there's a reason it comes up quite a bit on different versions of it, kind of to that question on the CISO Series podcast. I help put those shows together, and so I'm very much in tune with those conversations. And that drumbeat is not going on. There was just recently a thread on the cybersecurity subreddit talking about like people like talking to CISOs and then realizing they in no way wanted the job. Right, because you would think that was the pinnacle of your career. It's like, oh, it's actually everything I don't enjoy about. Like I enjoy being able to fix things, and CISOs in very many ways is it's like a communications role, it's damage control. It's like you're out of the nuts and bolts. So I think that is very interesting. And now a quick thank you to today's episode sponsor, ThreatLocker. Want real Zero Trust training? Zero Trust World 2026 delivers hands-on labs and workshops that show CISOs exactly how to implement and maintain Zero Trust in real environments. Join them on March 4th through 6th in Orlando. Plus, there will be a live CISO Series episode on March 6th. Get $200 off with the promo code ZTWCISO26 at ZTW.com. Steve, we have to move on. What is your last kind of big trend that you had this year?
Industry consolidations. Despite everything we've just said, there were some huge things. I mean, Google acquiring Wiz, for example, Palo Alto with CyberArk. I mean, these are now, again, just like the age of, let's say, the industrial robber barons of 1920s and 30s, we're seeing these enormous companies now grow in strength as they acquire each other to the point where the scale of the threat and also their strength becomes hard to fathom. So I think that's the other thing that I saw was despite everything else going on, we still see these big companies seeking to become bigger. And consolidation is just a larger entity, but with that comes a lot more management expense and obviously, I suppose, shareholder value. But that, to me, I find it very interesting, at least from the last year, just continued growth and acquisitions.
Yeah, and I think there is a little bit of a race to not, I can't think of the, that kind of first mover disadvantage here, right? Where there's so much new out there right now, but there's so many new AI security startups. I mean, just everything AI startup related, right? And so there's the idea that somewhere out there is, going to be the the open AI of AI security, right, is going to be out there, and it's incumbent on, if you're Palo Alto or Fortinet or any Google, Amazon, Microsoft, any of these big companies, to one, be developing your own, but two, to be on the lookout to acquire before you become obsolete, right, as things are moving so fast. So I think kind of our two of the trends, AI and consolidation, definitely going hand in hand. One, there's just more people to acquire. Now, Wiz obviously is a little bit of an older player, but certainly in the in the cloud space, very hot space, very big space, with all of these AI advancements that we're talking about too. I kind of had consolidation as one of my trends too, but it kind of leads into one of my big stories, which was kind of also consolidation we saw with threat actors, right? We saw Shiny Hunters and Scattered Spider merging together. We saw more coordination with advanced persistent threats kind of throughout the year. And I feel like, and again, to tie this into kind of AI is the main character now, I also feel like these threat groups are feeling pressure because it's also never been easier to become a threat actor. Yes, you can use Claude Code or whatever tool you want to write some kind of bad malware, but like if your phishing messages go, or you can just use it to all of a sudden you can craft a billion completely unique phishing messages, right, and send those out, right? You don't need any kind of human power to scale any of that, right? That can entirely be automated, entirely be novel. And the barrier to entry for threat actors, I feel like, has become incredibly low. And we've seen this throughout the year, right? We've seen areas that we don't associate with APTs necessarily. I'm thinking Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm thinking Southeast Asia. Some of those areas where we're seeing more they're not necessarily nation state linked threat groups, but advanced threat groups are threat groups that are doing more wide scale attacks and stuff like that. There's also only so much bandwidth for cybercrime, like at a certain degree. So I do think there is pressure on these large ransomware as a service operations and stuff like that. Like, hey, it's better if we work together. Our value add is so much better. We can have so much more return for our shareholders if we work together, as opposed to working against each other and allowing us to get nibbled to death by a bunch of new players on the market. So like that to me was one of the bigger stories that I didn't see coming. And then the more I thought about it, the more it made sense.
And yeah, and one thing that I admire about them, if I can say this, is that there was some degree of business sophistication here. Like you had like scattered lapses hunters. You had a group of people who had some, even when they were not consolidated, their capacity, for example, to guide their victims in how to best survive the ransomware that they just dropped on them. A customer service department that helped them avoid future ransoms. And then, of course, the whole notion of, we can help you.
They had a customer journey. That they had envisioned they were going to help you along.
Yeah, and of course the whole notion of hiring young people who don't have the scruples or concerns or even the obligations to worry about the outcomes, and they know they're not going to do time because they're too young. So having this workforce that is seemingly invincible and is aware of that. So the sophistication of bringing these individual gangster groups together, I think, is quite amazing. We will know that they've hit some degree of maturity, I think, when somebody from the marketing department says, we don't want to have scattered lapses hunters. Let's call ourselves SLH from now on. Once you get that nice short one-word thing going, you've entered the middle age of the corporate bad actor.
Yeah. Right now, it's the AOL Time Warner of threat actor names. It's like there was a fight and everyone lost when they came. Yeah, when they went with that. Steve,
I just hate to imagine the lanyards they'll have to wear around their necks when they go to the annual general meeting. His name is long.
They have to put it the other way. Yeah,
they will learn.
Steve, what was one of your big stories for this year?
Well, honestly, I want to go back to Jaguar Land Rover. Not for what we have already said, but the fact that this was not simply an automobile factory. Jaguar Land Rover is owned by Tata Motors out of India, and they're in the interest of maximizing everything, quality, output, and profit, of course. But all their factories are linked together. So the system is like one big, giant, mega system across all these factories in the UK and beyond. So one of the things that made this such a huge story, not just simply a run-of-the-mill breach, was that they couldn't turn it off. They couldn't isolate where the problem was because the entire thing was one big system. And that, I think, is a big lesson for organizations to learn, as well as we're looking at the various kinds of infrastructure we build inside organizations to make everything work better. Just the employee enterprise level communications and collaboration through to the cloud. All of these consolidated technologies we use to make the organizations more efficient it's like taking a ship and removing all the bulkheads from a tanker inside the ship. Once you start doing that, there's no division to isolate the problem. And that, I think, is what made the Jaguar Land Rover story just way more than just a breach. It was a revelation of a fundamental weakness of the internal construction of the organization, built in the interest of efficiency and profitability, but very quickly revealing a very, very obvious Achilles heel.
Yeah, and it's one of those stories where I have to imagine there's not a small number of organizations kind of looking with a similar org chart, similar infrastructure decisions were made for similar reasons. And these aren't the kind of things that we can just, we'll just fire up some cloud services and we can fix, there are some very fixed, very big giant, we talk, that's one of the problems we constantly see with OT, right? Where it's like, I'm not going to, just because I can't upgrade the OS doesn't mean I'm going to replace, this $5 million machine or something like that. Like there's so many considerations, right, that go into that. And it's not the kind of thing you can fix overnight, even if there's the collective will, right? Like in the moment, maybe you would have the will. If we don't want to be the next Jaguar Land Rover, it becomes tougher when this is going to be a 5-year plan. And by the way, we might get popped anyway, and might, have this exact same thing happen to us before we can kind of finish that up. So yeah, the tail effect of that, kind of knowing that this could be, we could see another version of this kind of somewhere down the line. I joked about Asahi with Japan running out of beer, but I mean, like, again, these are architectural decisions that companies have made for very good business reasons, by the way. No one was chiding them for making these decisions, and all of a sudden realizing that there was a I guess an externality that they did not realize, an externality called y'all gonna get hacked. So yeah, it was a very, very interesting story on a number of levels to kind of follow with that.
Well, I have one more if our time allows.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, well, the other thing we cannot afford to ignore this last year was open season on the U.S. government. You know, we saw several attacks everywhere. The Chinese hit the U.S. Treasury, for example. We saw SharePoint being a huge hole in a whole bunch of departments there, including the National Nuclear Security Administration, who suffered from these kind of attacks. We had Russian hackers stealing sealed records from U.S. courts' filing system. And then we had Doge. Now, without getting political, we still have this issue of unprecedented people sacking federal databases, which has not only caused some significant concern about privacy issues, but since things have moved on and the leader of Doge seems to have left, the remaining staffers are now worried about being personally liable for the work that they did in this project. So that was a big headache, I think, for the U.S. government for this year.
Yeah, that was one of the more remarkable. I mean, it's like the political news moves so fast that, not that I had forgotten about Doge, but I had kind of forgotten how bright that was. In like, there was a new thing like Doge exposes database online for 2 weeks or something like that, or evidence shows that they uploaded all of this agency's data to a public Google Drive or something. Like there was just so many angles. So it was so. I don't want to call it interesting, but it was just they had such a desire to move so quickly, right? That was kind of their whole, is very much a startup ethos of move quick and break things, and they achieved that. If that was their objective, and that kind of goes hand in hand with one of my other big story of the year, which was the CVE funding lapse that we kind of were staring the barrel down for a couple of days, and then kind of the NVD backlog, and I think that goes hand in hand of. The things that we thought were very fixed, kind of tent poles in the industry, turns out, I think, the willingness to kind of hand over a lot of data to Doge and allow it to move very quickly and try out many different things, for better or worse, probably, whatever. That the things that we thought were very fixed and very steady in the federal government turns out could go away very quickly or become suddenly unreliable in the case of like NVD or something like that. So yeah, I think two sides of the same, definitely the breaches. And again, I think it's very revealing to go back and look through the headlines and kind of, you forget on the day to day how many of those stories we saw this past year. So Steve, really good call on that.
Well, it's day-to-day for us, but it's long-term planning for the established threat actors who know how to play the long game. If you think about one of the quotes from Napoleon, for example, to go back to what Doge was doing, in the interest of being publicly accountable, Napoleon once said, never interrupt your enemy while he's making a mistake. I love that because that's a long-term thing, long-term thinking. Just let them do this, let them be stupid, let them reveal all this kind of stuff, and we will come in later and pick it all up. So that, to me, this long game playing in warfare is still around to this day, but we tend to forget that when we look at day-to-day events and just think, well, okay, we can now wash our hands of this. It's done. No, there are people out there who are counting on years and even decades before they strike, and that's another big problem. Yeah.
Speaking of long-term, it's time to make some predictions about what we will see in 2026, and mine kind of goes along with yours, Steve. My prediction is that we're going to be talking a lot more about quantum computing in 2026. You talk about let people make mistakes. We'll come in and sweep them up after they're all done. It's not a new idea of, steal now, decrypt later has kind of been the MO. It's not that, the idea of post-quantum encryption is not anything new. But I have heard more CISOs talking about, adopting NIST's, post-quantum encryption protocols. We saw Signal, we saw Apple, we saw a number of companies, IBM, all kind of trying to get ahead of this in a very real way that made it feel like this isn't a science experiment anymore. This is, we don't know when, but it seems like it's now in view of at some point this will be a thing that is accessible to someone in some capacity. I don't think we're going to see encryption probably not broken completely unless you're talking about Active Directory authentication. Congrats, Microsoft, on fixing your encryption there. But I do feel like we're going to be talking about it way more as a imperative in 2026 because I'm already hearing people worrying about it, and it seems like that's gonna definitely trickle down. I feel like. What about you, Steve? What are you eyeing for 2026?
Well, I have a couple. Number one is identity becoming the number one attack surface. We're talking now that attackers don't need to break into systems. All they have to do, as we've been speaking about already, is compromise the relationships between systems, such as OAuth tokens, API trust chains, SaaS to SaaS connections. I think we're going to see these are going to be leveraged a lot more as identity becomes the key weak point for attackers. The path's already been set. I just think that this will expand more in the coming year or years. The second one, if I may, is autonomous attacks. We started talking about AI before, and it's becoming to the point now where these robots are doing the fighting for us on both sides. So we're going to have more red team and blue team AI running 24/7, and the whole thing just escalating the war without us even having to get out of bed. So I think that autonomous attacks is going to become a big thing next year as well.
Yeah, and that becomes very interesting. We were just talking about this, prepping for I believe a Defense in Depth podcast about on the defender side. It becomes very interesting discussion of even if you can automate something, do you want a human in the loop? So that they're at least responsible for someone's responsible for the decision making, right? That's not a burden that threat actors have. So I do think how that evolves and the structures that we put in place so that we don't completely give up on the idea of human agency, I think is super interesting. My other prediction for 2026. This is a little bit more maudlin. We don't get into a ton of acquisition news like the Wiz, like the big giant ones we will talk about on the show, but not the kind of the more maudlin ones. But I think AWS is going to make a big cybersecurity acquisition next year. I don't know who that could be, but I think they don't want to be resting on their laurels. AWS typically doesn't do a lot of acquisitions. That they love to invest. I mean, Amazon is very famous for constantly investing in itself. Deferring profits for many, many years to keep reinvesting in the company. That being said, I think things are moving so fast. They don't want to be seen as, being late to anything. They really can't afford to, especially Google is picking up steam with the advent of AI and stuff like that. Microsoft not sitting still. So I think AWS will make a big cybersecurity acquisition in 2026. Don't take any financial advice from me is the other thing. So don't take any financial action based on that prediction, please, for the love of God. So Steve, I think we've put a button on 2025. What do you think?
It was an interesting year. It was like the famous Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. And we are living in interesting times. And I don't see it ending anytime soon. So I really enjoyed covering these stories with you, Rich. And again, I think it'll never get dull for us.
No, there will always be new spins and new stuff to talk about. And that's why you should probably come and join us on the Department of No each and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Yes, I turned that sweet sentiment into a nice big fat plug. But that's what we do at the end of podcasts. But please, we would love it if you could join us live, get involved in the chat. Send us some emails, feedback@CISOseries.com. We would love to read some of those on the air if they are germane. If they would just like to be unqualified praise of the show also, we will take those as well. We may not read those on the air. My vanity does know some bounds. But yes, we are really looking forward to bringing you some really fantastic. We've already got Chris on our team is doing some fantastic booking. We've had some great shows to close out 2025. Really looking forward to what we have coming next year. Lots of exciting stuff. So we hope you will join us each and every Monday. Why don't you set a calendar invite? It's the New Year's resolution to yourself. Block out 4 p.m. Eastern every single Monday and join us. We guarantee you won't regret it. That guarantee is not enforceable in any meaningful way, but I will still throw it out there anyway. So Steve, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time here at the end of the year, running through the news of the year. This was a ton of fun, and we'll have to see how our predictions did at the end of 2026. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds perfect. Absolutely.
All right. Well, from myself, for producer Steve, for all of the reporters with cybersecurity headlines, Lauren and Sarah, who couldn't be here, and I'm going to shout out to Sean. Sean, we hope we can have you on the Department of No We've sometime soon. We're always thinking of you. From all of us, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly new year.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.